A US Army facility for soldiers with mental health issues. A soldier opens a room and the door slams shut on its own. Glass shatters, but no one is inside. Arizona. Two guards spot an old man. Then he vanishes. Moments later, he's standing outside the fence. Germany. A generator's metal casing ripped and scratched, and the faceless figures with claws staring in the dark. Three reports. Multiple witnesses. The first case was reported by a sergeant named Murray. He had a 24-hour guard duty in a very special facility of the US military in 2015. This facility is a mixture of military prison and a mental health unit. On the one hand, soldiers are imprisoned there who have done something that, according to the military law, is an offense, and on the other hand, soldiers were treated there who had some kind of psychological problem. But that did not apply, for example, to soldiers coming back from any deployments. Rather, the soldiers who were treated there were considered a danger to their comrades. A female soldier who was treated there in this mental health unit had behaved so strangely and done such odd things during her 20 months of service that she did not receive the usual promotions to private or second private. Over time, she became increasingly noticeable because of very aggressive, hateful behavior towards her comrades. And at some point, she was admitted to the US Army facility. Not as a prisoner, but as a patient of this facility, and so she was assigned a single room. The female soldier very quickly gained a strange reputation. The other patients there did not want to associate with her. They were afraid of her. The rumor spread that she was a Satanist and practiced black magic, and that apparently scared the others. Because her aggressive behavior continued to draw attention even in this secure facility, it was decided that she would be dishonorably discharged from the army. On the day the discharge took place, the previously mentioned Sergeant Murray was on guard duty, which also included conducting the evening inspection of the patient rooms, as military rules still applied within their facility. Murray set out to inspect the rooms, and eventually came to the one where the discharged soldier had been staying. When they opened the door, they found complete chaos inside. In her closet, there were mountains of garbage and old rotten food remains. She had stopped flushing the toilet, but continued to use it. The shower and the bathtub were full of water and waste. From the ceiling, strings hung down with chicken bones tied to them. Some of these chicken bones were braided together with the strings into strange symbols. About 24 of these symbols were found in her room. The floor was completely filthy, and a circle of candles had been formed there. A description of the smell in this room is hardly possible. This entire room had a truly disturbing atmosphere. He informed a special cleaning team, who, dressed in a protective suits, completely cleared out and cleaned the room. Not long after this room was cleaned, the other patients in that ring reported that strange noises were coming from this room. There was said to be loud rumbling, as if someone were moving furniture in that room, and others reported as they walked past the door, suddenly someone inside seemed to knock violently on the door. This room was locked, and checks were carried out several times after such reports, but nothing could be determined as to the source of these noises. The day came when Sergeant Murray was again on guard duty, and together with a private he walked down the corridor, with the patients' individual rooms on either side. When they reached this locked room, a sound came from it that sent a chill down their spines. Murray described it as a terrible scream that sounded metallic and somehow as if it were playing backwards. The two stood frozen in front of this door, when another such scream came from the room. Murray decided to inform the barracks commander via radio and call him over. He arrived a few minutes later. He too then witnessed a spine-chilling scream. The commander was in possession of a master key for all doors, which he used to carefully open this room. He ordered the private to stay outside the door while he and Murray went in. But the room was empty. After they had looked around for a while and found nothing unusual, they decided to leave. Murray stepped through the door first, and as the commander followed him, the door suddenly slammed shut from inside with such force that it drew the commander against the opposite wall of the corridor. For a moment, he lay there stunned. He had sustained a head injury and a bruised shoulder. When he had pulled himself together, he drew his weapon and ordered Murray to do the same. And then the commander tried to open the door to this room, but it didn't work. The two soldiers threw their full weight against this door, which did not open a single bit. But now, because of all the noise, the soldiers from the other rooms had come out to see what was going on. And they all then witnessed a sound coming from this room. It was the sound of shattering glass and breaking wood. And suddenly the room door sprang open. And Murray and the commander looked into this room. On the opposite side of the door, there was a large window, and this window, along with its frame, had been broken outward, as if someone had jumped against this window with great force to get outside. The commander had the door sealed and posted 3 soldiers as guards, giving the order that no one was to enter this room again. According to Murray, there was never an official military investigation to his knowledge. The second story is about an entry in a guard report at the base in Arizona. It reported 2 soldiers, 2 privates, who were on a guard duty at a military base. This also included inspecting the outer fence of the site. This was a duty that was not particularly popular with the soldiers, because it was a really long walk to patrol this fence. This fence was several meters high, and at the top of the fence sharp wires was attached. This entire army area is a so-called shoot-to-kill zone, meaning that anyone who enters it can be shot without warning. As the 2 soldiers were making their rounds to inspect the outer fence, they heard a strange noise behind them, a kind of scraping. When they turned around, an old man was suddenly standing there. The soldiers described the man as being at least 75 or 80 years old, with long, almost white hair tied in braids. His clothes looked like they were made of soft leather. They raised their weapons, but didn't want to shoot him. He was an old man who didn't seem threatening at all. They ordered the old man to put his hands up, but he did not comply, only staring at them with what they described as an empty gaze. The soldiers were no longer sure what to do. They exchanged a quick glance and concluded that the man might be suffering from Alzheimer or another form of dementia due to his age and had somehow managed to get out into the site. But since it was at least 2 kilometers in every direction to an exit from this site, they decided to request a jeep to pick up the man and then drive him to one of the exits. So one of them reached for his radio, but there was no reception. There was only static, which was completely unusual. The other of the 2 guards came over and they concentrated on this radio for perhaps 5 or 10 seconds. When they looked up again, the man had vanished. The only thing they still saw was a large rabbit hopping around there. They looked around panicked, but there was no sign of the man. The 2 were naturally unsettled, but they continued their patrol. Just a few minutes later, they heard again this strange scraping sound behind them and turned around. And there was the old man again. But to their horror, they realized he was on the other side of the fence. It seemed completely impossible to them, and this elderly man turned around and walked toward the desert. Now the 2 went along the entire fence again to check if there was anywhere the old man could have gotten through, but they found nothing, and as mentioned, from the spot where they first encountered the man, it was at least 2 kilometers in every direction to the nearest exit. How could this elderly man suddenly be behind the fence? The 2 never received an answer to that. But others claim to have found an explanation. In the southwestern United States, dating back to Native American times, there are legends tell of mystery figures said to exist in the region. These are the so-called skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are said to be shapeshifters, able to take on animal or human form at will. While this was recorded in Native American legends, even today some claim to have witnessed a skinwalker transform. The hopping rabbit and the 2 soldiers saw after the man vanished has been suggested as one such case. The next story happened in Germany, in the former DDR. The story is about a report from a soldier named Adolf Schäfer. He was a junior officer in the National People's Army. He reports that he was on a training area with his platoon for training purposes. It is said to have been around 5 p.m. They heard a loud crashing and rumbling from a building on this training area. In this building there were supposed to be power generators, but the soldiers heard the noise but didn't pay any further attention to it. It is said to have been around 8 p.m. when the power suddenly failed throughout the entire site. And this despite the fact that the power grid had supposedly been inspected just a few days earlier. A lieutenant who was present was convinced that one of these generators had a defect. So he sent this Adolf Schäfer with 3 other soldiers into this building to check if all the generators were running. The three of them made their way to the basement. There were 3 generators there. The first 2 were working perfectly. When they got to the third, it was standing still. But not just like that. On the generator's paint, they discovered deep scratches in the metal. And these scratches were so deep that the metal casing had been partially torn open by them. The soldiers felt a bit uneasy, because they knew that you couldn't just tear open such a thick metal casing with normal tools or your bare fingers. So the 3 quickly went back to the lieutenant and reported what they had found. And this lieutenant then gave the instruction that the entrance to this generator basement should be guarded. The lieutenant himself informed the site commander about this incident. According to his own statements, Adolf Schäfer then resumed his normal duties. Sometimes during the night, as the soldiers lay in their quarters, he heard a loud scratching. The scratching noise didn't come from the nearby generator building, but was right next to him. At first he thought one of his comrades might be going through his locker, but when he slowly opened his eyes, he saw that all of them were lying in their beds. Schäfer now describes the following. When he had opened his eyes and saw that all of his comrades were lying in their beds, he already felt quite uneasy, but he got up to look around the room. And in one corner of the room he discovered a figure, and this figure slowly turned towards him. It was a grey figure, and when it had turned completely towards him, he noticed that this figure had no face, but long claws on its hands. And then it was as if something was penetrating his head. His thoughts were no longer his own. It was as if someone else was thinking his thoughts, and he felt as if he had completely lost track of time. And suddenly it went dark. Apparently he had fainted, because when he woke up he saw the faces of his comrades and a medic. To this day he has no explanation for what could have happened that night. Unfortunately, as he describes, he made the mistake of telling the doctor who treated him about this incident. His mental state was more or less questioned, and he was advised to keep the story to himself and not tell anyone. All 3 cases are not made up, they have been recorded in books, but still, the question is if they are real or fake. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.